Okay, so depending on what you're wanting dogs for, a lot of indigenous custodians imagine that these dogs will perform better running down game if they breed them with greyhounds. And the problem with that is that you start getting unpredictable shape of mind. You might get a dog that has a better shape of body for running, but I can't imagine much better than this. The nice thing about these dogs' body shape is that they are good for running long distances. A greyhound's shape is good for a sprint, and very little else. These dogs can keep running all day, and once they have done their sprint, they'll go into a steady trot and keep that up all day. So these dogs' bodies, in my mind, are the ultimate shape for a running dog. They're beautifully shaped for a running dog. If you look at proper sledding up north, where they breed what they call the Alaskan Husky, which is a hound husky mix, predominantly hound husky mix, they've bred a dog that can run all day. And if you have a look at those dogs' shape of body, it's not that different from these dogs' shape of body. That is the shape you want for a running dog. Now, with greyhounds, you've got a sprinting dog, which is a slightly different thing. It's long legs and a slender body to be able to run faster. You've got a longer gait, so you can run faster. Now, the problem with that is, in creating the slender body, you have a smaller lung capacity. They do have deep chests, but it's a two-dimensional depth. If you go into a three-dimensional expansion, you get a much bigger lung capacity than if you go into two-dimensional expansion. So the moment they start having to rely on oxygenation in their exercise, a greyhound starts becoming less effective. So you've already got a good hunting dog if you're going to run for quite a while in these dogs. Not that I'm supporting hunting, but the breeding of the greyhound to get primarily a good hare chaser, you get this dog that can end up sprinting faster. And that is something that has been sort of popularized in sort of open areas in the Northern Cape, where they have a greyhound mixed with an AfriCanis. It was popularized by a photographer. His name now slips my mind. He sort of photographed these cross AfriCanis greyhound dogs, and he published a whole set of photographs, very, very beautiful photographs, a very talented photographer. And he photographed these dogs and posted these photographs as AfriCanis dogs, but in actual fact they are greyhound type. Now the difficulty with that is, again, you are not working with the same gene pool, you're working with a slightly different gene pool. In the greyhound it's less severe than it is in other breeds that you mix them with, because they all originate from the Upper Nile Levant area, whereas most hounds come from the same area. So the greyhound back would have shared a common origin with the AfriCanis. But you get a dog with a different shape of mind. And that's the important thing to consider, because one of the important things when you are breeding animals is not just the look of the dog or the shape of the dog, but also the way it thinks and the structure of the mind. And you get a different structure completely when you introduce the greyhound. So we're not big fans of it, and it's quite important, I think, as it is whenever one is looking at a mixed breed of dog, to understand that can't form part of the conservation strategies of the organization. It's outside of that parameter. Look, they actually are credited with it. If you read the book by Major Hawley, Major T.C. Hawley, I think, he wrote a book called, I think this was around about the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. He wrote a book called The Origins and Breed Standard of the Rhodesian Ridgeback. And in that book, he describes the origin of the Ridgeback. And look, the ridge is it's not prevalent. It's a recessive trait in the AfriCanis. But my Injasuti, who I've spoken about, she carried a ridge gene. She had a little curl on her back, and when she had pups, one of the pups had a full ridge, so she carried the ridge gene. It's a recessive trait, and it's not one that one would breed for ordinarily. It's an aesthetic anomaly. It can actually lead to negative traits because it's associated with a condition called dermoid sinus, where the hair follicle can actually attach quite painfully onto the spine. So it's not an ideal trait to breed with, but it is a feature that has shown itself in AfriCanis dogs from time to time. Now, the origin of the Ridgeback specifically comes from a incident where a Methodist minister, Reverend Helm, was moving from Swellendam to take up a commission of his congregation in Bulawayo, and he traded for two dogs. He traded for these two dogs to accompany him on his wagon trail up into Zimbabwe. This was in the late 1800s, I believe, 1870 or so, and so he traded these two dogs. One of them was a dog with a ridge, a female, a bitch, and he called her Powder. I guess she must have been light-coloured, but Powder, he apparently brought these two dogs to accompany him, mostly for protection from wild animals and what have you as they were passing through the Transvaal. And Powder proved to be such an effective hunter that she kept this little wagon train in food the whole way. And she got such a reputation amongst the people in this little wagon train that when they got to Bulawayo, there was this big game hunter, C.J. van Rooyen, who hunted with dogs. And he was so impressed with Powder and her hunting skills that he swore he would never hunt with another dog again unless she was one of Powder's pups. And the way he identified whether it was a pup of Powder's was the ridge, which was identified in Powder, and so they got quite legendary status in the Bulawayo area. They bred Powder with a number of different and her offspring with a number of different European breeds, some of them Great Danes, some of them English pointers, mostly working dogs, dogs that would have been used for hunting. And at some stage they got to the breed shape and colour in, I think, I don't know the exact dates, but I think it was 1960s about, some 30 or 40 years after Helm introduced Powder into the Bulawayo area. They held a breed fanciers club, and they started, I think 5 dogs started. They had a show, 20 dogs arrived. There were many different dog sizes, different colours, all of these ridged dogs from the area, and they eventually settled on the size, shape and colour of the Rhodesian Ridgeback. They ended up with 5 dogs that formulated that gene pool, that breed pool, and that's the rest is history. That's where the Rhodesian Ridgeback comes from.